Hello friends, the objective here is to learn what are the incorrect variable names. So we'll learn about it, and then we'll also learn about what are the local variables and what are the global variables. So let's define few of the variable names, and let's do like this course. So here we have tried to create a variable one with name var1 with capital letter V, and another variable var1 with small letter v. So both of them are correct. Now we can introduce an underscore and then one, and then assign a string to it. This will also work. So these are actually correct variable names. Allowed variable names. Not allowed variable keyword. A keyword cannot be a variable name. Okay, this is a wrong practice. You cannot start with a number. It will not allow you to. So this is a wrong practice. It will give you invalid syntax. Okay. If you start a variable name with a number, that will also give you an error. Okay. If you start with at, that will also give you an error. If you try to declare a variable with a blank space, then also it will give you an error. But you can start with an underscore. This is all allowed. So you can start with an underscore, you can start with an alphabet. Later on you can add, later on you can add a number in between the variable names. So these are the allowed variable names. This is not allowed. This one is also not allowed. At is also not allowed. This is also not allowed. So these are allowed and incorrect and correct variable names. Now like try to understand what are local variable names and global variable names. So first define a variable x is equal to 3. So we have defined a variable, declare a variable x, and then the value assigned to that variable is 3. Okay. So this is fine. Try to print the variable value of x. So this is 3. Now define a function, right? Func, and then define a variable and then print x. Now call this function. So it is printing x. So by default, what it is referring to? It is referring to this value x, and that is why it is printing here 3. Now what you have to do is uh, x is equal to 5, and then now let's see what it does. It changes the value x is equal to, now it is printing 5. Why? Because this is a local variable. This is a variable which is defined inside this particular function. Okay, this is a variable x is equal to 5 is defined inside this particular function. Now while we are calling this function, inside this function this x has a value of 5, and that is why it is printing x, and it is referring to this variable x which is local to this function and not global. If we do not have this particular x here, then while we are printing x, it is referring to the x which is defined here. Okay, now let's try to learn about a global variable and a local variable. So anything which is defined inside a function is called a local variable, and if some variable is defined outside a function, then it is called a global variable. Let's take an example. X is equal to 3. So this is a global variable. Why? Because it is outside the function. Where is the function? Let's define a function. Def is the keyword which is required to create a function. So we have just about to create a function with name func. and then a colon, and then print x, and then call this function. Sorry. Now let's call this function here. Now let's see what it does. So we have defined a variable x is equal to 3. So x is a variable. Number 3 is assigned to this variable x. Now we have created a function using the keyword def. The name of the function is func, func, and then what this function is doing, it is printing the value of x. And here we are trying to call that function. Okay. So it has printed 3. Okay. So where this x is referring to, this x is referring to a global variable which is printed, which is outside this particular function. This is the function. This is the function. Okay. Now let's make few of the changes here. Inside this function, create another variable x, and this time assign value 10 to that variable x. And now let's call this particular. Now let's print this particular code. What is happening here is, first x is equal to 3 is assigned, and this is a global variable. This is a global variable, right? Just because this x variable is defined outside this particular function area. Now we have created a function using this keyword def. The name of the function is func. Inside this function, we have two statements. One is that we are defining a variable x with a value 10. So the life of this variable is only limited to this particular function. The moment we are out of this particular function, we are the life of this x variable goes. So while we are calling this print x, it is actually referring to this x is equal to 10. Now, if you print here x outside this definition, this function area, this function, this print x will refer to the x variable, which is a global variable. This is a local variable. Let's see. So this function is referring to a variable x which is local to the function, okay, and has a value 3 and has value 10. This print x is referring to a variable which is global and has value 3. I hope this particular program may have cleared your concept of global and local variable. Now there is another concept. You can use a keyword called global. So there is a keyword global. So this is a keyword inside Python. How do you know that this is a keyword? Because the moment you write any word and it changes its color, that means it's a keyword and it cannot be used as a variable. And remove this statement here and take use of the global keyword and global x. That means this x variable is now a global, although this is defined inside this particular function. Okay. And we have defined this, the value of x is equal to 10. So what this function will do, it will print the value of x is equal to 10. Let's see. So it is printing x. Now even if you write a print statement outside this function, then also it will print x. Why? Because this, although this x variable is defined inside this function, but the life of this x variable, just because we have declared this variable as a global variable, even when we are out of this function, this global variable x still stands there. Okay. In this case, the moment we are out of this function, this x is equal to 10 doesn't stand, and this x is equal to 3, which is a global variable, is still valid. And that is why print x gives us 3 here. But in this case, it will give you 10 because it's still valid outside this function. I hope you may have got the concept of local and global variable. Thank you.